Good morning everyone. We are the group 5 to present our topic for today, assessment contractions. Let me discuss to you first the learning objectives. At the end of the lesson, the student should be able to first identify the appropriate test format to measure learning outcomes. Second, determine the steps in planning and constructing a test. And third, apply the general guidelines in constructing test item for different test formats. Let me discuss to you about planning a test and constructing the table of specification or TOS. First, what is TOS? TOS is a test map that guides to the teachers for a constructing a test. And TOS can be used for help the teachers frame the decision-making process of test construction. And what is the important steps in planning tests are: first, identifying test objectives or lesson outcomes. Second, deciding on the types of objectives test to be prepared. And the third one is preparing on the table of specification. And the fourth one is constructing the draft test items. And the last one is tryout and validation.
So moving on in identifying the test objectives, it is a comprehensive test that covers the various levels of Bloom's taxonomy. So in identifying test objectives, again, it must cover the various levels of Bloom's taxonomy. Okay, so kung makita nyo sa right side ng screen nyo, yung blocks na colorful, so yan po yung ating Bloom's taxonomy, wherein it consists of 6 categories, which are remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. And each objective consists of a statement of what is to be achieved. Next is deciding on the type of objective test. So the test objectives guide the kind of objective test that will be designed and constructed by the teacher. Okay, so sa pagpili po ng kung anong objective type of test yung gagawin ng isang teacher, magbe-base siya sa test objectives na ginawa niya. So for example, sa naunang level or categories, multiple choice. While sa ibang levels naman, we may opt to give an essay test. Ano pa ba? True or false and matching type. Pero tandaan natin na our test objectives will serve as our guide in deciding the type of objective test that we will give to our students. Okay? Next, let's now move on in preparing a table of specification or yung tinatawag natin na TOS or TOS. So, a table of specification or TOS is a test map that guides the teacher in constructing a test. So the TOS ensure that there is a balance between easy and difficult items in the test. Okay, so sabi dito, TOS ensures that there's a balance between easy and difficult questions. So meron kasi tayong tinatawag na LOTS or yung lower order thinking skills, and HOTS, which is yung higher order thinking skills. Okay, so balikan lang natin yung Bloom's taxonomy kanina, no? Di ba meron siyang 6 categories, which are remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. So sa Bloom's taxonomy, LOTS or the lower order thinking skills are under remembering, understanding, and applying. While the HOTS or the higher order thinking skills ay under naman siya ng analyze, evaluate, and create. Okay, so in this slide, it is the example of table of specification or what we call TOS. So sa left side of the table, nakalagay dyan yung topics, and sa tabi naman nun is yung learning outcomes per topic. So it consists of 9 learning outcomes. Then beside the learning outcomes, number of hours naman yung nandoon. And then sa tabi naman nun is yung cognitive level. So ano-ano to? Ito yung categories of level. Categories of cognitive level na makikita natin sa Bloom's taxonomy. So makikita natin na kalat-kalat yung numbering, di ba? So sa test 1, numbers 1 to 2 is under ng remembering. And sa topic 1 siya. And sa topic 1 siya, di ba? And under siya ng learning outcomes. While 3 to 7 is under naman ng learning outcomes 4, which is nasa topic 2. Tama ba? Nasa topic 2? Yeah, nasa topic 2. So as you can see, naka-aligned yung cognitive level sa learning outcomes. Lahat yan, no? Kung i-check natin per number, no, naka-align yan sila lahat sa learning outcomes. Okay, so moving on to the number of items, there's a total of 60 items. No, 60 items itong test na to. And sa topic 1, under remembering, test 1, numbers 1 and 2, there are 2 items, di ba? Ayan, nakalagay dyan. Number of items, 2. Okay, so in order to get its percentage of the items, we are going to divide the number of items sa total ng items. And we will multiply it by 100. Again, para makuha po yung percentage, si number of items is i-divide natin sa total of items. Then, i-multiply natin siya sa 100. Okay, so dito, i-try natin tong number 1 and 2. Diba? Meron siyang 2 items. Okay, so 2 divided by 60 times 100 is equal to 3.33. So, ayan, 3.33 po yung ating percentage sa items 1 and 2. And ganun lang din yung gagawin natin sa ibang items. So, for us to get the percentage of the items. So, ang total po nung percentage na yun, percentage of the items is total of 100%.
Table of specifications or TOS is sometimes called a test blueprint, and it is a table that helps teachers align objectives, instruction, and assessment. So this strategy can be used for a variety of assessment methods, but it is commonly used or associated with constructing traditional types of tests when, for example, constructing a test, teachers need to be concerned that the test measures an adequate sampling of the class content at the cognitive level that the material was taught. The TOS can help teachers map the amount of class time spent on each objective with the cognitive level at which each objective was taught, thereby helping teachers to identify the types of items they need to include on their test. So, how to construct a table of specifications? First, we have to list down all the lessons that cover the examination. You have to list all the chapters, the topics that was covered during the learning period. So, learning outcomes is the next step. This is the objective of your test, or what do you want your student to do in taking the examination. You have to provide all these learning outcomes. And for the third one, you have to think of your preferred target hours in each lesson. So assigning number of hours in each lesson will be the next step, and you have to total it at the end. So after that, you have to compute for the number of items per lesson, and you can do that by following this formula. So target number of hours in each lesson divided by the total number of hours multiplied by the target number of items, and you will get the intended items for the first lesson. So you can do the same procedure or computation for the other chapters or lesson to know how many test items you need to create. After all of that, you have to compute for the total percentage items per lesson. So this can be done by computing using this formula. So the total number of items in each lesson divided by the total number of items multiplied by 100, and it will be the total percentage of items per lesson. After all of that, you have to assign the items under the 6 cognitive levels of the revised Bloom's taxonomy, or the revised Bloom's taxonomy rather. So you have to identify whether the items or numbers in your examination falls under the remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. So the goal of an educator is to use Bloom's taxonomy in order to encourage higher order thinking skills in students by building up from lower level cognitive skills. So the actual construction of the test items follows the table of specifications. So every test item should be analyzed. It is generally accepted principle that the test construction is a collaborative activity. So an individual, no matter how expert he may be, can potentially subject to making mistakes. So therefore, in order to minimize this, test items should be reviewed by a team of experts or teachers, or by collaboration of teachers. So it could be examined or critically examined through the correspondence between test content and the table of specification. So they would also consider the form, level of difficulty, and the appropriateness of the test items. So after reviewing the items, the expert will offer some subjective comments, and after that, it can be made through necessary modifications and will be drafted to undergo pre-testing. So the items will be revised before testing it. So in this step, the item which has already been corrected or reviewed are being rewrite. So let's move on to the characteristics of the test itself, which are validity, reliability, reliability, and practicality. So for the validity, it will tell you how good a test is for a particular situation. So on the other hand, reliability will tell you how trustworthy a score on that test will be. So you cannot draw valid conclusions from a test score unless you are sure that the test is reliable. Because tests can be reliable without being valid. However, a test cannot be valid unless it is reliable. So another way to think of it is that a test can give a consistent or poor result. However, it cannot give a good result unless it is consistent. So now, let's proceed with the major characteristics of written test. So for the purpose of classroom assessment, traditional tests fall into two major categories. The first one is the selected response test, and the other one are the constructed response test. So selected response test or selected response items ask students to select the correct answer from a list of options included in the item. So these tests are those that are composed of questions to which there is typically one best answer. So they are sometimes referred to as objective assessments. So these tests are good for assessing students' ability to remember and understand course concepts and materials. So some of the most commonly used selected response tests include multiple choice, fill in the blanks, true or false, and or matching questions or items. So while on the other hand, constructed response test or constructed response items ask students to write or construct the correct answer instead of selecting it. So constructed response can be defined as an assessment task that requires students to apply their knowledge and critical thinking skills to real-world problems. So it is often called as open-ended questions or responses, as they require the student to construct and develop their own answer without the help of other suggestions, options, or choices, unlike in selected response test.
So now let us move on to the types of selected response test. So what is selected response test? So selected response test is a test that composed of questions to which there is a typically one best answer. So according to Zuski 2018, selected response tests are sometimes referred as objective assessment. So selected response test includes the multiple choice test, the true or false or the alternative response test, and the matching type test. So now let us discuss first the multiple choice test. So multiple choice test is one from the objective response for the objective assessment. So this format is the most frequently used in educational testing. So it consists a STEM, the problem or the questions, one correct answer, and three or more incorrect answer or the distractors. Guidelines for constructing multiple choice tests. So first, do not use unfamiliar words, terms, and phrases for the students may not be confused. Second, do not use modifiers such as much, often, usually, etc. So modifiers are not appropriate when it comes to the multiple choice test. Third, avoid complex or awkward word arrangement. So do not use awkward words because it leads to confusion and it is difficult to analyze. So fourth one is do not use negatives or double negative statements because it tends to be confusing. Fifth, each item, the STEM, should be as short as possible. So each questions, each problems should be short or avoid too long as possible. So 6, distractors should be equal, plausible, and attractive. So distractors or the incorrect answer, the options should be attractive. All multiple choice options should be grammatically consistent with the STEM. So the option should be grammatically connected to the problem or to the questions. So 8, the length, explicitness, or degree of technicality of alternative should not be determinant of the correctness of the answers. 9, avoid STEM that reveals the answer to the another item. So 10, avoid alternatives that are synonymous with others or those that includes or overlap others. So here is the example of multiple choice test. So as you can see, there are the stem or the problem, the questions, and the one answer among the choices or the options on which it is the distractors. So next is the true or false or the alternative response test. So it is consists of statements. So if the statement is accurate or correct, then the statement is true. While if the statement is incorrect or the false true, it is probably the statement is false. Here are the tips for developing true or false questions. So first, avoid negative or double negative statements. This can unnecessarily confuse the students. Second, keep the proportion of false statements slightly higher than the true statements. So students tend to guess true on uncertain questions. And lastly, avoid trivia. So make sure that your true or false questions directly assess the learning goals. So here is the example of the true or false or alternative response test. So as you can see, it has the statements, and each statement is answerable by true or false. So another types of selected response test is the matching type test. So matching type test, it consists two sets. It can be a set A or set B on which it match with each other based on the specified attribute. So it consider as modified multiple choice type of items where the choices progressively reduce as one successfully matches the items on the left with the items on the right, or in the set A to the set B. So guidelines for constructing matching type of test. So first, match homogeneous, not heterogeneous items. Second, the stem must be in the first column, while the option must be in the second column. So the first column should be consist of the stem or the problems, the questions, while on the next column or the second column, it should be consist of the answers from the specific questions in the first column. So third, the options must be more in the number than the stem. So the options should be more compared to the stem or to the problem. Fourth, to help the examinee find the answer easier, arrange the options alphabetically or chronically. So for the examinee, find the answer as much easier, so we should be arrange the options alphabetically or chronically. So fifth, like the other tests, the direction of the test must be given. So like the other types of tests, here in the true or false, the direction must be also given. So here is the example of true or false or the alternative response test. So as you can see, it have the sets or the set A in the first column and the set B on the next column or the second column, or the what we call the column A and the column B. So the column A are the questions, while the column B are the answer or the options to the questions in the column A.
Ayan. So good morning, my name is Robbi Sañez and I will be discussing about the types of constructed response tests. So kung kanina pinag-usapan natin yung iba't ibang form of assessment, kung paano ba ginagawa ang isang assessment and ano yung kahalagahan ng pag-i-implement ng different types of assessment, magpo-fall naman tayo under sa types of assessment in a constructive response test. So usually sa constructive response, may inaantay na tayong sagot. Meron na tayong masusukat na agad natin yung sagot because the response is already constructed. Ayan. So, one example of a constructed response test is the short answer test. It is consists of open-ended questions or incomplete sentences. Usually, ang mangyayari dito, duduktungan na lang. There is already a pre-mentioned concept and the students will only follow. For example, the fruit is edible and it is blank. So, duduktungan ng students kung ano yung sa tingin nilang connected do sa topic na una nating inilagay. So, possibly the students would place that the fruit is edible and it is already for sale. So, the sentence already for sale is already added by the students na lang. So, that is the short answer test. And usually, ginagamit ito sa mga essay type para ma-recall kung ano yung naintindihan ng students. Next. So, these are the types of short answer tests. Yung in-explain ko kanina is a form of completion. It is consists of incomplete statements that later on ay duduktungan ng students. Pangalawa, there is also the identification. It consists of statements that require the learners to identify or to recall the terms, concepts, or people, places, or events na dinedescribe ng question na yon. So, for example, we have the subject of religious education. And the short answer test, you will place the example prayer, the creed. Then the students will place the answers dun sa mga blank. Example, the prayer, I believe in God, the Father Almighty, and so on. We will put some blank spaces and the students will fill in if they recall what is the prayer all about. Then, the last type of a short answer test is the enumeration. It requires the learners to list down all possible answers to the question. Moving on. Ito, isang example ng short answer test sa isang examination. As you can see. Next. Constructive response test pa rin, under which nagpo-fall siya sa type ng essay test. So kung kanina meron na tayong given na mga prompts or meron na tayong mga blankong spaces doon, pero may nilalagay tayong clues, dito sa essay test, magbibigay naman ng question and the students will answer afterwards. So wala na tayong fill in the blanks na mangyayari. There is already a form question that the students will answer. Ayan, there are also two types of essay test, which is the extended response and the restricted response. So, the extended response, much longer and complex responses. So, ito yung example. How are the leopard and tiger differ? Support your answer. There is always the phrase, support your answer. So, parang hindi lang basta sasagutin mo, but rather you should give concrete examples. While on the other hand, the restricted response, it is more focused and restrained. So, kung kanina, you should require much longer and complex responses, dito sa restricted response, naglalagay tayo ng kung ano yung dapat nilang sagutin. And usually, ginagamit ito sa mga mathematical essays or equation questions. Kasi, mathematical and science rather. Kasi gusto nating sagutin ng students yung exact na hinahanap natin. So that's there is always a subtopic part A, part B, part C, like what is shown in our PowerPoint na meron nakalagay na identify and explain regarding dun sa question. So moving on po. Ayan, isang example ng essay test. Usually, this essay type of test ay nakikita natin sa last part of examinations because hindi na lang siya about recalling there is the cognition kung ano yung naintindihan talaga ng students. Hindi siya basta na identify this, identify that. Essay type of test requires thinking and elaborating what the students understood during our lesson. Moving on po. Ayan pala. So kung kanina na pag-usapan natin iba't ibang type of tests and the importance of assessment, the way we form our assessment and such, we will end this lesson in a statement that assessment is today's means of modifying tomorrow's instruction. Kasi teaching requires follow-ups. Hindi pwedeng you teach now, you taught the students what the lesson is, diniscuss mo, pinag-aralan, then afterwards, yun na, tapos na. There is always the need of a follow-up assessment para yung mga estudyante ma-retain sa utak nila and somehow we consider ourselves as future educators. We should follow up everything with assessment so that we will take note, we will give emphasis, we will follow through kung ano ba yung sukatan natin, kung nakaintindi ba yung mga estudyante, kung alam ba nila yung tinuturo natin, and lastly, kung may na-retain ba sa lahat ng tinuro natin, because it is not always about the knowing what to do or knowing what is being asked, but rather mas maganda kung nai-apply nila kung ano yung tinuro natin sa real life situation, which is the main focus of education. Not just about learning the terms, learning the sequences of the lesson, but rather what does this sequence of the lesson helps us to do as human beings. That is the point of education, to really apply what is being learned to the things that we do normally as humans. So I hope that you have learned something from today, and that's all. Thank you po for listening in behalf of my group, together with Miss Claire Ann Romero, Miss Joline Reyes, Miss Sharlene Tamio, and Miss Erica Vizmanos. I am Robbi Sañez, and this is our presentation. Thank you po.